and to meet the volunteers of MRC, and also special welcome to some of our steering committee members of the Age Friendly Project, including Jean, who created this connection. Also, Denise is here with us. And just a little bit of background, this training is part of the Age Friendly Communities Project in Franklin County in the North Quabbin. This is a project recently launched by LifePath, and it's part of a global movement that was created by the World Health Organization to make our communities better for older folks and people with dementia and their care partners. So this is the first of our training in a series of community education programs we'll be providing, and I couldn't be happier to be doing it with this group. And it's been such a pleasure meeting you, Corinne, and creating this connection. And so without further ado, I'll just share my screen and we can get right into reframing aging. All right, so I think you can all see my screen. So I'm gonna try not to take too much time of this hour speaking, so we can have some interaction with the people attending, but just to take some minutes to talk about this Reframing Aging initiative, where it came from, why it matters, and what's been done so far. And then we'll discuss how it can affect our work with older adults. So this is a national initiative that was launched in 2014 by 8 national aging organizations, collectively known as the Leaders of Aging Organizations. These include AARP, the National Council on Aging, the Gerontological Society of America, and other grant makers in aging, some of the big ones. And they did this because they noticed through their work is that the public has a misled perception of aging, and that affects the work that is being done with older people, both in direct services and larger public policy work. So they wanted to address these negative views of aging, promote more accurate perceptions, and use that to develop more supportive aging policies. So the first phase, they started in 2014, and they had a 5-year grant to do research on public perception of aging and what the American public thinks, and then test some strategies and tools of how to talk about aging and how to reduce the implicit bias. And that was done through the Frameworks Institute, a group of social scientists that study the impact of language and narratives, not only in aging, but on other things as well. This was one of their big research programs. And then since 2019, they extended this initiative for another period, this time to try to sustain this momentum, engaging professionals in the field, to have a widespread this research to be widespread so that it can have the maximum impact possible. And they've been doing this since 2019, and they're looking to continue doing this. And I guess this is also informally part of that, although I'm not part of the Frameworks Institute, but we work in this field of aging and coming across this very important initiative. And I've been in contact with them, and they give me the copyright to share their material and things like that. So they're happy that people are talking about this, because that way it can have the maximum impact. So this research was done in order to, as we said, understand how Americans think and talk about aging, how they respond to different messages, and what are the best ways that we can start a conversation about aging that would lead to solution-focused discussions instead of problem-focused discussions, which most times lead to ignoring them and not engaging. So their research found that the public's perception is decidedly negative and antithetical to how most older people feel and what experts in the field know to be true. And they found this through a few different big patterns, thinking patterns and misconceptions that I'm gonna get into. But before that, I just wanted to hear from you as well, and invite some of you sharing about some common misperceptions about aging that you've come across. And you can feel free to share this by unmuting and talking, or by sharing in the chat.
I'll just mention one experience that I've had as a chaplain, that it seems that sometimes the people that I deal with They feel because they're old, they're perceived as not understanding. They don't have any ability because they might not be able to hear well. People just assume that the words are not understood. And I see they really struggle with the identity that, listen, age doesn't mean that I still don't have pride in who I am and what I need to do. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe.
And we do have a comment in the chat, which is that we stop moving because we get older.
Absolutely.
I had one question. I noticed your research went into what American perception is, and I know for a fact that the Nordic countries take care of their elderly. Asian countries venerate their elderly. And when I was visiting Greece, I was with a family who had the grandparents downstairs, the married couple in the middle, and the parents upstairs. So they were all taken care of. Is that a cultural thing with America? Is that why it was researched differently here? Or is it because we're America that, I don't know how to frame the question. You get what I'm saying now?
Yes, certainly. I get your question. This was focused on the US. They specifically have comparison to other countries, but coming up, they do mention this idea of individualism, of that fabric of family and society, and some things that you're referring to and the impact. So that comes, but not necessarily in comparison to other countries. But thank you. I think we also have in the chat, because we are Asian doesn't mean we automatically develop dementia. This is also one of the big misconceptions, is that by age, automatically there's decline in thinking functions and things like that. So thank you so much for the examples that you've shared. So in terms of the research, they found major things. There's a lot of misconceptions, and most of them can fit in these 5 categories. The first one is the idea of real versus ideal aging. The public holds simultaneously 2 contradictory views of aging. And it's important to mention here that when I say real and ideal, they don't mean actual real and ideal. They mean perceived real by the public and the perceived ideal agent by the public, which is something that is promoted by the media a lot. And so there's this perceived ideal aging, which encompasses accumulated wisdom, which encompasses active lifestyle and earned leisure. It is a vision that contrasts sharply with what people sometimes identify as real aging, which is, they think of it as decline, loss of control and dependency, and as Jean mentioned, decline in cognitive facilities as well. So these are both promoted by the media a lot, because the media, it works for it a lot to have individual stories that are outliers, that are not the norm. And so on the one hand, very active older people in their 80s or 90s that are surfing or that are traveling the world, which are really great examples, but also don't represent the majority. And at the same time, outlying examples of older folks who are really struggling and suffering. And sometimes that portrayal gets perceived as, gets generalized as the general state for a lot of older people. So that's number one. Number two is us versus them. This idea that the negative views of aging a lot of times come from a sense of othering, of separateness. Because conversations about aging tend to be focused a lot about problems and about threats, a lot of times people talk about it in the they. There are some terms that this research found to be not helpful in these conversations, such as the use of pronouns. We talk about older people. It's much better for us to use we, because we are all aging. A framework where we are talking about it in the collective, where we are bringing ourselves into the process. When we age well, because we are living healthier and longer lives, these things we can do, versus terms that they defined like the elderly, the use of the pronouns they, without actually thinking that everybody ages. That is also a thinking pattern that affects the perceptions on aging. Number 3 is individualism. And this is the idea that another dominant pattern of thinking, that people think that the outcomes of your aging phase or older life is only the result of your individual choices in your 20s and 30s. And so if you take good financial and health decisions and lifestyle, then you are going to have great aging. If you don't, then you won't. And this disregards a lot of the social context, a lot of the public policy context, a lot of the social determinants of health that are many times outside of a person's decision-making powers. And this bleeds into number 4, which is lack of solutions, which is exactly that fatalistic view that if you are an older person in a difficult situation, because you didn't take those decisions 40 years ago, it is too late, that there isn't things we can do to help older folks, which is, according to experts in the field, which is something that's not true, that public policy and that providing services can have a huge impact on the quality of life on older adults. There is no lack of solutions. There's sometimes just a lack of seeing them. And then finally is the threat of modernity and nostalgia. And this is kind of touches a little bit upon what you mentioned, Jerome, I think, is this idea of family fabrics. And this is not just in the field of aging. In a lot of fields, there's this thinking pattern that life used to be better and is getting worse now. Families used to be more connected. Nobody cares about each other now. Our communities used to be better. And surprisingly, you'll see this is happening now. 30 years ago, people used the same thing, and 100 years ago, people used to. So that threat of modernity and that nostalgia is also something that is big in here. Okay, any questions or comments about this before we move on to the next piece? Okay, I'm also seeing a comment from Denise saying that I continually see the writers in the media refer to people in their 60s as elderly. And it's time to redefine that term and have conversations about the words that we use, not only indicate bias, but that are wrong. And I absolutely agree. All right. So why do this work? Why reframe aging? There are 3 main reasons that this research points to of why this matters. First of all, is that misperceptions have documented negative effects. We've talked about fatalism, if there's no solutions, we're not going to do anything. There's less opportunities for employment for older folks. And I'm not only talking about people in their 80s or 90s, even people in their 50s start to suffer from this ageism in employment. There's also a number of studies that have linked experience in ageism with decline in physical and mental health because of the lack of support. Now, that's the negative thing that we can avoid by reframing. On the positive side, there's a growing body of research that documents the benefits of older people thinking positively about their age. That includes longer lifespans, improved health, mental and physical health, and reduced likelihood of dementia. There's also, as we mentioned, a huge gap between the public belief and the expert understanding. The idea that aging is something that is bad and there's a battle with aging is one of the reframes that we need to step away from. We are all aging. If the moment we are born, we are aging. This idea that we need to stay young and fight aging, whereas if you think about it, if you're not aging, the alternative is not that great, since everyone who's alive is aging. The idea, again, that people think that aging means decline, that aging means health problems, whereas experts know that aging is normal, that there are, with the right support, with the right help, people can lead long and healthy lives, and it doesn't mean that cognitive decline. And that context matters, obviously, and the public policy can make a big difference. And this is their theory of change. They say that the field of aging needs to advance a set core of ideas that creates the shifts in public understanding and essential to building the political will to create a more age-integrated society. So they think it starts with us. Expert communication, it's of defining these ideas, changing the discourse among people, especially that work with older folks. That changed thinking will lead to that political will that can actually improve policy changes. And finally, I wanted to share some priority framing strategies that they identified. And I'll be sharing, don't worry about all these notes and sentences, I'll be sharing more documents that have much more details after the training, but just to share a few of these priority framing strategies. The first one is defining aging itself. What does this mean is, like we said, disrupting the othering of other people and sending the message that age, like any older age, like any other time of life, involves both challenges and opportunities. So there's challenges with growing older, but there's also advantages to growing older. And that's something that we don't talk about, the experience, the wisdom, the ability to navigate situation, the ability to contribute to our communities as older folks is not mentioned. Second one is highlighting the importance of social context and social policy, and that people's health outcomes in older age is not 100% their own choices. That's something important. Elevating that awareness, which also creates a sense of shared stake and public purpose. When we step away from thinking about it as a zero-sum thing, because we are combating this othering with and integrating aging issues into our larger societal issues, we're stepping away from, if we give money to an aging program, we're taking it away from a youth program. There's sometimes this zero-sum competition, which is not healthy. So we need to look at this as a shared stake, that aging programs also are going to work for young people later in life. Using ingenuity value to gain support, that this is a new era for us as humans. The population makeup is different, is older, but this also brings some opportunities with it. And that's positioning this aging society as an untapped resource. And that so many older folks who want to participate, who want to contribute, who want to be there, and to give from their experience and even from their money and from so many things, but that exclusion makes it almost an untapped resource that we are not using to help our communities. And there's a few other ones, like using this justice value, which is a very American value of justice and a place in the community, and including examples of what society can do better is one of the big framing strategies. It's not just this is bad, older people are being looked at in a negative way, but infusing our conversations with positive examples, with things that can help us move forward. All right. Are there any questions or comments at this point? I'm going to stop sharing my screen and look at the chat. And in the meantime, feel free to think about some questions. You can type them in the chat. You can unmute and let us know.
Nora, I was just thinking about this phenomenon that because of the way aging is framed, that people who are aging, we hear they feel marginalized, begin to believe that they don't have something valuable to contribute. And I just wanted to say that this is part of what it is that we're trying to combat with this initiative to match volunteers to help seniors engage creatively, get them reconnected with the things that mattered to them when they were younger, you know, when they were more vibrant, with the hope that it will spark, you know, like reignite that experience of, you know, a greater connection with themselves, a greater connection with the world, a greater connection with the things that they loved, feeling like they have something valuable to contribute, perhaps in writing their story. So that's how this all, you know, links together. And so I'm hoping that this initiative and more talks like this will really help to change that experience for all of us, because, you know, as you said, I mean, we're all going to get there. Maybe by the time everybody on the screen here gets there, everything will have changed. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
It certainly would, and I 100% agree. I think, I see your hand, Denise. I'll get to your question in a second. But I totally agree. I think this research really frames it as a public perception, but there's definitely that very important element of that internalized perception of older adults themselves, because of how rampant these thinking patterns and misconceptions are, and we deal with them from a young age. People start to internalize this, and so older folks sometimes feel this way as well, and younger folks who are gaining in age start to believe that they're going to decline, that they're going to have less value in society, that their voice is not going to matter as much, and that they will not be able to contribute as much to society. Part of a lot of different factors, but definitely one of the benefits of this work, especially in the context of your upcoming program, is helping that self-perception with the seniors that we're working with, and encouraging them to certainly ask for what they need, but also contribute what they can, which is, I think, a great way to look at it. Okay, Denise, go ahead.
Hi, I wanted to know if you, or if this training session would be providing some of those examples that were talked about just a minute ago. Because unless you have good examples and anecdotes that you can put into your own conversation when you're, you know, talking with other people about some of the things that the framework shows us, you don't have as great of an impact. So I was hoping that some good examples of how to talk to people about these things would be included in this training, and if not in this one, in another one. And then secondly, while we were all talking about this, I was thinking about how there's a really big obstacle in our society, and that is the pharmaceutical companies, who make a lot of money by perpetuating the myths that a whole group of people need what they have, because if they don't have their pharmaceutical products, we will continue to age terribly. That is something that's out there, and it's probably not going to go away. So just so that that's in the back of everybody's minds, we have a big problem with folks who can make a lot of money on all of us who are aging.
I'd like to just add on to what Corinne had said earlier, because I think she brought up a really good point, and that is to share stories. You know, I feel that as we age, legacy becomes more important to people, and sometimes it's that connection, that relationship that we want to build really starts when people understand that their life really meant something, and that we want to hear those stories. And by sharing those stories, allow them to open up and really create that relationship. And I think that's so important to focus on what we've done, and that our life does matter, because as we get old, I think that's a question that we all, you know, juggle around in our minds. So I just wanted to follow up on that. I thought it was a great point.
Yeah, thank you both. And Denise, just about your comment, absolutely, I'd love to provide some examples of conversations. Maybe I can actually share this so we can all look at it together. But this is one of the documents I will be sharing after the training. I didn't want to overwhelm you with so many words before we even talked, but this is a little bit of a start guide, just some examples of things. So sometimes there's this tendency to use natural disaster metaphors to talk about aging, like a tsunami, a tidal wave driving off the aging cliff. Those are definitely some things that, when noticed in the conversations, some things that can be corrected, some things that could be pointed out, that we can talk more affirmatively about aging. We are living longer lives, and that is a good thing. And we can also live healthier lives. Again, things about choice, planning, and control, individual determinants of aging, focusing on finding creative solutions. There's this little debate about some terms. Elderly and age independence, pretty clear that through this research that was bring a lot of implicit bias. Senior is one that they include here, and in some of my conversations, there's still that resistance with the term seniors. So at least in my conversations, some people still like it, some people think it should be the one that we move from. And again, like I said, the frame of struggling, battling, fighting aging is not one that we want to perpetuate. It is a normal, it's just living your life. You don't have to battle and fight aging. And like I said, using ageism without explanation. One that's big is comparing ageism to sexism and racism and other isms. That's also been identified as not healthy, as the public disengages immediately and sees those other isms as bigger, and to start to compare and then puts Asian to the side. And so definitely redefining it and bringing in concrete examples like intergenerational community centers, intergenerational connections, some of the works that this resiliency program is going to be doing. Those are some examples of how we can reframe these conversations. Does that answer your question, Denise?
Yes, somewhat it does. And I had read that before and I found it helpful, but I also think that, and I don't want to dominate this in any way, but it would be really helpful to even learn more about how, here I'm in a conversation with, I want more examples. And I was thinking I'll start putting them together, and maybe everybody else here might have some ideas about how, when you're in a conversation, you might say this, or you might say that, use actual words. Because if we want to actually serve as educators, we need to be really clear on what kinds of words have the best impact and the kindest and most gentle kind of motivating factors embedded in them, so that people don't, tighten up and say, oh, that's ridiculous, but say, oh yeah, I understand why I should probably not say he's an elderly person. I mean, people don't mind being elders because that implies there's some wisdom, but they don't want to be called elderly in general. And those are the things that maybe all of us can start to think about and maybe at some point put together. And thanks for answering my question.
Of course. Go ahead, Jerome.
To what Denise was saying, what is being done in the psychological realm where people believe they're old and they have to act this way because they're old, they're 70. Corinne made the statement 60 is a new 40, which means I'm 70 and that's a new 50. I feel like I'm 40. So it's a matter of how you think about your aging. I think it's great what Toby said. I have more free time. I feel good. Feel like $1 million at this age. I wish I had this at 37. But where the psychology of you are what you think. You are as young as you feel. So are they addressing that? Because I've had a lot of patients in my office, and they just shuffle in like they're old and find out they're younger than me by 10 years. So
yeah, I've absolutely, I've seen this in this research as well. The idea of again reframing the idea of staying young. But instead, like you said, age is a number that indicates how long you've been here, but that shouldn't be the thing that indicates your state of life or your value. And so they do reframe it into staying active, staying involved, participating in community. So even that term of staying young sometimes can have that effect that you mentioned.
I think there's also a value that doesn't always happen in trying to share the stories in as many situations as possible, not just in a, structured storytelling situation. an example I would had was I was talking with some young queer folks about some of the LGBT history. And when I used as an example being a first aid station for many of the pride marches in Northampton, they were shocked that there was a need for a first aid station. And we had to have a whole discussion about folks having to wear paper bags over their heads when the pride marches started. And, you know, big differences in attitudes and thinking and this and such. And it was just a part of a conversation because we were sitting at the same table, not necessarily, and that can also have a big impact. So I want to also encourage that folks not just look at having structured stories and news, but how to encourage ongoing in all of our lives.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Betsy.
It's feeling a little bit, you know, I have to say, first of all, that I feel much younger than I am. And people say I look younger, and I enjoy that, which is part of the you know, dealing with assumptions and all the rest of it. But having said that, I think there's a reality also that I'm feeling like we're being a little judgmental here, that it's attitude and so forth, because truly, as one ages, one's body is not what it was. And while every single human, in terms of the physical aging and the limitations that come with that, every single human is different. It's an inescapable fact. And I think we need to find ways to embrace the reality of that too, so that we accept that it's not complaining, but it's a statement of a reality in one's life.
Yes, I appreciate your comment. And I think I absolutely agree. And I think the point that this research is trying to make is not that as we age, we should maintain our full physical capacities, is that the normal limitations that come with age shouldn't lead to the current limitations we have in our communities. For example, yes, people as they age, have a harder time moving around progressively, but that doesn't mean that in our communities right now, you can see people so socially isolated, not because they can't walk or they can't move, because there's no transportation options, because there isn't support in getting people to the right places, to their appointments, to their and so those limitations that come naturally with our aging shouldn't lead to the limitations we suffer from societally, if that makes sense. Which is where the reframing aging.
Right, it does.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more time for questions later. I just wanted to take a little bit of time to do a breakout room discussion so that we can have more intimate conversations about this and to relate it a little bit to the work that's ahead. And so we're going to be in the breakout room for about 10 minutes. And then we'll come back and have some reflections in the big group, and then we can close together. But the question for the breakout room is, are there ways that reframing aging can support your upcoming work with older adults? And so if there are not, feel free to share that also, that if you think that this is useless in your upcoming work, that's your valid opinion. But also, if there are ways that I think there's so much experience in this room that we can share with one another, some ways that we can imagine impacting our work, but also our personal interactions with older adults as well. All right, are there any questions before I send you all to the breakout rooms? Go ahead, Mark.
As a healthcare provider for the last 47 years, it's been my experience that society has looked at the elderly as the frail population. They have nothing to offer, and I've worked in nursing homes, on the ambulance. I've held many a hand, and the histories people tell, it's amazing. You don't know who they are. They were doctors, they were soldiers, they were psychologists, you know, and they still have a sharp mentation. And what I'm trying to get at is, I think that and it's happened to me because working on the ambulance, I've had peers tell me, what do you know? You're old, you know, and I stay right up to date with the art, and I keep improving myself. And I like to dance circles around the young ones, but try to tell these young guys to appreciate the elderly for what they have to offer, for who they are. And the most important thing is to remember the humanity. They are what built this country. They are what created us. And it's a slap in the face. I mean, I'm 67. I feel like I'm 39. And that's my Jack Benny joke. You know, people just look at me and say, what do you got to offer up here? You know, my physical capabilities are getting challenging, but I still have a lot of energy and a lot of ability to talk and to educate. And, you know, I don't talk at people, I talk to people. And the greatest thing that I had in the back in the ambulance was not responding to emergencies, but taking Grandma A to a doctor's appointment, holding a hand and talking and hearing about them, you know? And unfortunately, in America, we don't appreciate that. And you see it in the news, you know, 69-year-old attacked by a group of young kids. You know, it's ridiculous. Japan honors their elderly. We need to bring that around here to America. And I guess I've said my piece.
Thank you so much, Mark. All right, we're gonna head to breakout rooms. I'll just remind you of the question. Are there any ways that you think this reframing agent can support your upcoming work with older adults, or also your personal interactions? And then we'll come back and get some reflections. All right, see you soon.
So are we in a breakout room?
No, we're in the main room.
Okay.
I'm assuming maybe you didn't get an invitation because you're also the host.
Okay.
But let me see, wonder if I can, if you click, can you click the breakout room button?
Yeah, I see.
Okay. You'll see, you can join one of them. Just click join on one of them.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to join breakout room 3.
And a lot of that difference that I saw in that aging in the LGBT community is the linguistics and the pronouns that we use, that we're used to using, and we're not aware of the impact it has on other people. So when I think about the reframing aging and how it helps me in my life, I think one of the points that one of the people brought out is pronouns that we use and the sensitivity that sometimes what we're used to saying might not be the right thing to say. And that we need to be sensitive and we need to understand. We need to empathize, not say, gee, I want to know what it's like, but actually to be in that with someone else. And
I just see elderly people, so
I just wanted to share that. And I thought that was a great point.
I'm sorry I missed that sharing, Joe, and that I've hopped into your room a little late. So the question was, how could reframing aging help us with the program moving forward that we're developing in working with this vulnerable population? Oh, did I just do it? But it's true. I mean, it is a vulnerable population. And I guess partly because of how it's framed, but I think one of the challenges will be that we're going to be dealing with some beliefs that someone has about themselves.
Mhm.
Potentially, I don't have anything of value to, what do I have to contribute? What do I have to, write about? What opinion do I have that is valuable? Maybe it's about a film that they've watched together. So I think that when you're dealing with negative self-beliefs that are completely reinforced by both the media and by society, it really may take, it's going to take a lot of patience, I think. And, it's going to take more than just, people will say, oh, you've got so much to offer, or,
Mhm.
you're beautiful. But when somebody has a belief about themselves, hearing that doesn't necessarily change it. Or perhaps it just, it's going to take longer. So I think one of the ways that the program can help is maybe, helping us to understand that, and maybe coming up with some strategies for, I think just showing up with someone repeatedly might hopefully, cause them to say, wow, someone's joining me. Maybe, maybe I am valuable. Jerome, you had your hand up?
Yeah, in the office, you have a short amount of time to get to know someone. And I think what Mark said, the humanity of the elderly, what they have to offer, etc., but you don't know that unless you ask them. And one of the things that I was taught, it's rather than when you meet someone, rather than talk about yourself, which people like to do, ask them where they are, where they come from, what was their, one of the best things I've done is ask, what did you do for a living? Because most of them are retired. So what did you, and that's what the answer I would get, I'm retired. Well, what did you do? And you'll find people that maybe were stunt people that you never thought, or, just some of the answers, but nobody doesn't like to talk about themselves. And I think that's one way, and you can see a beam with them. So, and it's just the fact of letting someone know you honestly care with what went on in their life, what happened to them. So I think that's one way to approach it, and change maybe their perceptions.
Let them talk.
Mhm.
And also ask them. You have to nudge them. Some of them don't want to talk about it. I remember when I was growing up, all my aunts said nobody wants to talk about the war, World War II. Wasn't the case when I spoke with my uncles. They wanted to get the story out. They wanted it heard.
Mhm.
And it was just nice. So.
And then you hear sometimes people say, oh, no one wants to hear what I have to say.
You're right. Right.
Sue?
Well, this this part of the conversation right here brings to mind an incident that happened with me yesterday. I was doing some simple shoveling out back where we live with a shared parking area, and trying to arrange it so we could get plowed out better. And there's a woman that has sort of the plum spot down there that if we could clear it out, it would be easier for our plow guy to actually effectively clean the driveway. Well, she's probably 10 years older than I am, and I assumed that she wouldn't want to move her car. And so I got things arranged so she wouldn't have to do that. And when I saw her in the parking area, she said, oh yeah, I'll move over, no problem. So, for me, this is an opportunity for self-reflection and how, like Corinne, you said, oops, did I just do it? And I was like, yeah, I just did it like both feet. I was all in, assuming what somebody wouldn't or would do, right? Before checking in with them. And I think in, working with adults, aging adults, myself, to take a pause, like Jerome was saying, and ask and listen. And I blew right by that. And, I think for me, I can reflect on my own life and how I was brought up and what I was told and who wants to hear what and all that sort of stuff has come forward with me. And why wouldn't it for everybody? But to take a moment, just take a moment and ask. This is very revealing for me. I'm kind of loving it. Thank you.
I also think it's really important to keep a holistic view. What someone's work history is not who they are entirely, because there's all kinds of pieces. And we forget sometimes that maybe someone has a family of choice and not a strong biological family connection, or maybe they've been very involved in some type of spiritual path, and that may have changed several times over the decades, or other interests and personal, some of which can be really beneficial to how they interacted with the community, what their communities are on many levels. But we often get really narrowly focused, and we need to, not just look at the tree, but look at the forest.
Right.
So what questions to ask? Good questions to ask when we start interacting with someone that we're matched with. Maybe that's the point.
Mary? We can't hear you, Mary.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
This computer is bad. Anyway, with normal aging, different body systems age at different rates in different people. And so I think it's really important that society makes allowances for people as they get older for the things that they can't do, so that they can do the things that they can do. And I think that's a real important part of any program that we would be doing. And I think this has been said before, like transportation and housing and providing opportunities to do these things. So, I mean, when you're working, you have a whole group of people that you interact with, and all of a sudden now when you're retired, you don't have that group. So it's trying to make those new connections.
Yeah.
And in times like this, making them in new ways.
Yes. Absolutely. And we're all finding that there's ways that we can contribute.
And then suddenly I wasn't, or I wasn't, nobody was there.
We just got transformed. But I think like we were talking about the same thing, or like we have agreement on that one.
All right.
Are we back in the main room?
Yes,
we are.
Welcome back, everyone. We're in the main room and we only have a few minutes left, but I just wanted to open the space, some reflections if you want to share some of the things that were that we talked about in your breakout rooms. Maybe you can have one person per room.
We talked a little bit about communities that are unfortunately segregated. Someone spoke about a 55 and older community and how they wouldn't want to be in that community. And I wonder if there are examples from other countries that have done a better job at structurally creating co-housing that brings together multiple age groups.
We actually talked about a related entity, which is the quote unquote generation gap. Several people, Lori and Denise, talked about the fact that there's this misperception because you don't spend a lot of time with people from another generation regardless of the age, whether it's somebody in their 40s or somebody in their 50s. And it's just not the way we live anymore. We tend to be in communities where you're with people the same age, so that there are misperceptions potentially in both directions, where younger people don't think older people have anything to give, but they don't spend any time with older people. And Denise, maybe you'd like to share your experience with the GCC.
I will just really briefly. I really don't want to dominate that, but we were seriously. It sounds like we're all talking sort of about the same thing. GCC created this program where they wanted to reach out to older adults, and part of that was a mentoring program. So they put older adults together with some of their students, and the response was across the board. Oh, I learned so much from my mentor. Now, oh, I learned so much from my mentee, because there definitely were age differences between them. It was so positive, because those folks otherwise wouldn't have gotten to talk to anybody like their conversation partner. And that was really important, which leads to access, which is what we were talking about. How do we have access? How do all of us have access to people who are not like ourselves, so that we can continue to grow? And I think Margot at the end brought up something that was really interesting, right? Everybody else who was in my room, about how our brains work better when we, oh, Margot, I wish you would say this because I know I'm going to get it wrong, when we interact with things that we don't know that much about. And so we grow when we have those conversations. Margot, you would do a much better job explaining that.
Someone in my group, and I forgive me, I think maybe it was Mary, talked about this being an opportunity for self-reflection. This being, forums like this and information like this, and realizing where we ourselves have biases and use language. And so, very useful to have these conversations, I think. One of the things I thought in the context of how reframing aging could help with our program would be with, certain questions that we could ask to, help someone, help us get to know them, get to know what's important to them. Because, we're dealing with, in many cases, we're dealing with self-beliefs that folks have that are reinforced by media, by society, by language, by just, reinforced in every way. And so that would be useful to have some examples of ways to engage in conversation. And yeah, I think I covered everything. It was really a good conversation, one that could certainly go on and on. And I hope we'll continue to have these conversations.
Absolutely.
Has anybody ever seen that? I saw it on Facebook. It shows an elderly guy and an elderly woman. They're in the bathroom of a nursing home, and they're looking in a mirror. And basically, the caption says, "Don't judge a person by their appearance." On the left side, there's an elderly person. In the mirror reflection, there's a pilot, a nurse, a doctor. And you said reflection. So you got to stop and think what they had to offer and what we could learn from them, instead of saying, "Oh, you're old."
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your reflections and for the rich discussions that you had. Maybe you can have one more before we close out our time together.
Will this be available on PowerPoint or anything for us?
This, well, the presentation from today was recorded, and
Okay.
so we'll be sharing that link in an upcoming newsletter.
Yes,
Okay.
and yeah, thank you for the questions. I also, once I get your emails, I'll love to send you a follow-up email with more of these documents, with the slideshow as well. And also with my contact information, so we can stay in touch. And in the chat, I'm putting a link for a very short eval form, just a couple of minutes. If you are able to fill it out now, that would be wonderful. But I also include the eval in the email as well. And I'm very happy to meet all of you, and very happy and excited to have more conversations with this. I'm working full-time on age-friendly communities. And so if you have interest in the program, if you're interested in more sessions like this, please feel free to reach out on the phone, or we can schedule the Zoom and have a chat whenever it works for you. And so much thanks to you, Corinne, and to MRC and to Jean for creating this connection. And yeah, this has been so nice. Thank you so much.
Thank
When
you.
this is over, can I talk to you personally?
Sure, absolutely.
That'll be great.
Here, I'll just drop my email in here, and then you can reach out to me and we can exchange more.
Hey, everyone, I'm gonna read the introduction of Noor again, because I neglected to hit the record button when we started. So I'm just gonna do this again. Noor Ekatabi-Strouk is the age-friendly manager at LifePath. Prior to this position, Noor worked as a facilitator and project manager for multiple nonprofits in his hometown of Casablanca, Morocco, mostly focusing on community development and socioeconomic integration of at-risk youth. He has also organized and facilitated programs with various international nonprofits in the Middle East and in the United States. So I wanted to get that on record, because that's impressive stuff. And happy that we've learned firsthand what it's like for Noor to be sharing his experience with us.
Yeah, Noor.
Thank you, everyone, so much.
Bye-bye.
So everyone click on the link to the eval before I end the meeting. I think that's going to take us somewhere else. Good.
And just as a side note, Noor, are you still there?
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
I lived in City Slimane for 3 years.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
City Slimane, Morocco.
Oh, Sidon, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
That's cool.
yeah. My dad was in the service, and I lived over there.
Yes.
And I made my first communion and confirmation in Casablanca. Yeah, and the Baby Atlas Mountains and all that.
Nice. Well, I'm excited to connect with you and chat about this later on.
All right.
Thank
It's
you,
always
everyone.
a pleasure.
Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
day.
Thank you.